Thanks, John, and it's fantastic to see these wonderful pictures by Mr. Stickman. In The White Flamingo, the narrator says that pornography and art are separated by two factors. One is colour. Pornography is often colour, art is black and white, and the other, in art, you often don't see the face. But anyway, my next guest is a good friend of mine. I go to his house, I've been to his house twice, and I always bring a bottle of wine with me, knowing that he doesn't drink wine and that I can drink it by myself. Cheers, Tom. And the last time that Mr. Tom Vater performed here was electrifying. There was static, there was chemistry, there was sound difficulties. But tonight it's going to be fine, Tom. Please stand up and greet your audience. A fine writer, publisher, and a good friend, Mr. Tom Vater. Put your hands together.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Between 1965 and 1973, the CIA ran its biggest covert operation in Laos, which resulted in the death of several hundred thousand people. And during that time, the American Secret Service built an airport in the middle of Laos called Long Cheng. From 65 into the early 70s, that was the busiest airport on the planet, with more than 400 flights a day. And nobody knew about it. The Americans didn't know, the American people didn't know about it, Congress didn't know about it, nobody knew about it here or anywhere else. And in 1973, the Pathet Lao and the Vietnamese overran this airport and rang in the end of the war in Southeast Asia, the American War. My next novel, The Man with the Golden Mind, is out in April. It's a follow-up to the Cambodian Book of the Dead, and that's what I'd like to read from tonight. It is about the secret war in Laos. It's partly set in the 70s and partly set in 2001 and 2. It's the second novel with Detective Meyer, a German detective who comes to Asia to solve crimes of nefarious and political nature. So I'd like to read you a scene from the book, from The Man with the Golden Mind, which takes place in 1973. In the book, my detective comes to Laos to solve the murder of an East German cultural attaché who got killed in Vientiane in 1976. And as he arrives in Laos, he realizes that there's quite another story behind this, which stretches back to the American wars in Southeast Asia, and to a mysterious American assassin called Weltmeister, which is the German word for world champion. Good evening, Chris. So, Laos, September 1973. Beginnings were easy. Dressed in black fatigues, his face darkened by paint, a black cotton skull cap on his head, Weltmeister slipped out of his hooch and made his way down to the runway. For a few hours each night, Long Cheng was silent before supply planes and bombers started landing and taking off at the crack of dawn. For almost 8 years, the secret US base had been a nerve center of the war in Laos. He was at the heart of things, a heart that no one knew existed. He picked a moonless night. His friends, Cronin, Taylor, Herr, Flitman and Daniels, would have passed out by now. He'd worked and drunk, killed and laughed with these guys for close to a decade. They'd shared good times and bad, both stateside and in Indochina's darkest jungles. Nothing brought men closer together than the atrocities they committed in the name of God and country. They were tight. They were fighting the good fight. And if they didn't look too closely at what they were doing, the professional justifications they were served by the handlers were sufficient to allow them to take pride in their work and to absolve them of the demons that arrived on the scene in the wake of rape and murder. Weltmeister wasn't a drinker, and he did look closely. An owl sounded into the night, and Valentina's eyes, dark almond-shaped and full of love and sorrow, washed over him briefly, piercing his heart deeper and more painfully than any bullet could. Bullets were easy. Love was a killer.